Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production with Eric and Andrew. In our weekly conversations, we explore how we approach our committed relationships as a powerful catalyst for mindful leadership and inner dominance. As men who intentionally lead our powerful feminine partners, we share insights for discovering how the craft of consciousness deepens our capacity to love, serve, and connect with our true selves.
This topic will be fun because we're going to go through and break down one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements, and go through each one of them and how it relates to dominance and life in general.
I think it's a great starter book. If you're at a point in your life and you want to read something and live under some values and you're looking for some guidance, and the gist of it is that we live in a world where we have been domesticated by our upbringing. We've been conditioned, domesticated. I love that word, domesticated. We've been essentially brainwashed unconsciously and consciously to behave in a certain way. And in order for us to free ourselves from that, we have to make new agreements. And a great way to liberate yourself is literally to make new agreements. And these four agreements are a good place to start. They work. And the other big thing about this, that's a big premise, and I think this is going to take us into it's not actually the first agreement, it's the first agreement we're going to talk about, which is not taking anything personally. But one of the main points of this book is that nothing that anyone else does or says needs to impact you, needs to affect you, that you don't have to take it personally. It's not personal. People's actions and words, no matter how personal it is a outgrowth and a manifestation of their domestication, of their stories. And so what it is to be truly free and liberated is to not take anything personally. And I think in some ways, if I were to take all these and do one of them and choose one to try to live by, that would have the biggest impact on a personal level, on the way the world impacts you, not your impact on the rest of the world, but the way the world impacts you and your reactivity. I would say this would be the one that would have the biggest impact in insulating yourself from other people's words and actions. And it's a crazy thing at first to hear. I remember the first time I read this, I was like, that's not possible. And it goes along with the untriggerable. To me, it's very closely linked to something that you've talked about, being untriggerable. But it says, do not take anything personally, is the agreement. So the first agreement that we're going to talk about is to not take anything personally. And we'll get into the other three. But go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about this book is the way that it gives you a sense of agency over your own internal state.
Yes.
And the reason that it does that so well, and it is a great book for anybody who's new to personal development. It's also a great book for anybody who is a ways down this path and needs almost like a reset or a recentering, because the beauty of this book is in its simplicity. And no matter how far you go, the truths that are spoken in this book impact you on an incredibly deep level. And I come back to this book over and over again. And the concept and the reason that they're called agreements is that every single thing that we do in our life generally is driven by a fear and a need to protect ourselves, because we bought into something, that domestication, that conditioning that we went through when we were young, and we learned who we thought we had to be. We agreed, even though we didn't know we were doing it. We were young, we were immature, and we didn't know any better. All of the ways that we are driven by fear, all of the ways that we're driven and motivated to avoid pain, are things that we chose for ourselves. It might have been when we were 3 and we didn't fucking know any better. But if we chose them, then we can also choose something different. It didn't happen to us. It was me that decided.
It's your reactivity. And this first agreement of not taking anything personally is a great place to catch where your agreements no longer serve you lie, where you're triggered. Where you're triggered is where you're taking something personally, and that's where you're being defensive. And I feel like the word defensive, anytime you find yourself being defensive or needing to do any of the deers, the notion is that anytime that you're having to over explain yourself or you're having to be defensive or any of these kind of things, that's a place where you are being protective, like you said. And those places where you're being overly protective, you're often taking it personally, and you're finding that the other person's, what they're saying is impacting you. And if we could realize that what they're saying is actually a projection of their own reality, it's not your reality, it's their reality. And that, especially in a relationship, especially with the feminine, and the more feminine she is, the more true this is. Her truth is not based on objective reality. It's not for you to judge it. It's not for you to condemn it, but it's definitely not also for you to take it personally as an indictment on you or an indictment on your leadership or your masculinity or any of that. And the more that you take it as an indictment, the more you take it personally. And so the process of domesticating yourself is really a process of how can we not take things personally.
Yeah, and there is nothing less dominant than letting someone else's feelings control your reality, right? That's putting their feelings in charge or putting them in control.
Right.
If we want to, and again, the way that we talk about this, feel dominant, not just act dominant or play the part, but actually feel that solid and that strong inside of ourselves, we can't make somebody else's stuff that they're going through, we can't make it about ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's why actually taking things personally is a very selfish thing. Mm-hmm. Everything you're experiencing, I don't even give a crap about it, because what about me?
And I think this is where a lot of people that are your addiction, because you're often impacted by the world around you, and it's impacting you in a way where you're taking it personally. And so then you are making it about, and that's where women say, why are you making it about you? Like in this moment, what they're saying is, don't take it personally. My shit, as a woman speaking, shouldn't, like, the more you could hold my shit, the more you're actually in a dominant role. Like the more that her flow and energy and problems and collapse, if I can hold that and not make it about me and not take it personally, that actually equals conscious dominance. That's the whole game. That's the whole part of the problem, part of the solution. And it's also not being a victim. So these things all come together. When you take something personally, another way of saying it is you have a victim mindset. You're being a victim.
Let's give a little example of making it about me, because I think a lot of us as guys have had that thrown at us by women in the past when we've maybe been doing this and not realizing it. But I want to make this crystal clear for anyone who's listening to understand what we mean, or what women mean when they say you're making this all about yourself.
Do you have an example? I have some too.
Just a general example is, if, let's just say your woman is upset about something that happened at work, and she comes home and she's complaining to you or just venting to you about what happened with her and what she experienced and how she felt about it. If your reaction to that is something along the lines of, well, yeah, here's what happened to me today, or I had a really bad day too, or I really wanted us to have a fun night, and then you just came home and you're bitching and complaining about work. Every one of those little examples is, she's having an experience, and I've told her through the way that I've responded to it that I don't care about what happened to you. I care about me And the fact that you're sharing this with me is doing something to me. I'm making it about me. It's like her experience is now impacting me getting or not getting what I want. So that's, in this case, like taking it personally, making it about myself. What about me?
What about my
Mm-hmm.
needs? What about the fact that I'm sensitive to your? See, men think that they're not sensitive. When we talk about sensitive as a positive thing, it's being able to assess what's happening and feel. It's like the sensitivity of an instrument. But there's also sensitivity that's connotated with taking it personally when you're being overly sensitive. And that's what we mean by taking it personally, is like when you're overly sensitive to, and that's often unconscious, where their emotions or their feelings or your woman's feelings all of a sudden impact you, and you start feeling something because they feel something, which the first time you hear this seems crazy that you can actually be independent of other people's feelings.
Yeah.
But think about a toddler. A great example is, have you ever been around a toddler and they just get upset and they start crying and being crazy? Most adults are like, whatever,
Yeah.
it's a toddler, he's 3, and it doesn't really affect them. That's the way it could be with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, when they're getting really upset, just think to yourself, oh, it's their inner child. They're acting like a toddler. That's what they do. And your capacity, my capacity to not get ruffled in that, allows me not to be in fight or flight unnecessarily, not to be triggered. I have so much more capacity to think, especially in a relationship, to think and to love and to own and to hold and to be aware of the context and lead in a situation such as that, that will serve. And when they're really upset, if I could just do that, actually, it ends up where she calms down just by my capacity to not be affected.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm not affected is when I actually, and when I'm not taking it personally, is actually solving the problem. But if I come in trying to solve the problem, it comes off like I'm taking it personally. So a lot of times when people try to solve the problem, they're not actually trying to solve the problem. They're trying to make it so you're not so upset, because that you're upset makes me upset.
Exactly.
And then they feel that I'm upset by your upset. So they don't think that you're solving the problem. It's really about solving the problem. They think that that your upsetness is the problem that I have to solve.
Right.
This is like a woman brain thinking.
Well,
and so the guy's, I'm just trying to solve the problem, I'm just trying to help. But in reality, he's not really trying to help. He's trying to make it so that you're not upset, because when you're upsetting him, when you're upset, it makes me upset and I'm impacted. And I don't want you to be upset, because not because I care about you, but I care about me not being upset. That's the way it comes off.
Yeah.
Am I right?
It's a great example. And then we end up in this back and forth of where layers outside of the actual problem as it got started. Now we're arguing about our patterns and our pain avoidance techniques rather than actually being present with what's really going on. And I think the important thing to say here is, when I say something like, don't take it personally, when we talk about this concept, we're not saying don't care about her. This is actually much more caring about her experience. It also doesn't mean throw your needs in the garbage, because that's what a lot of guys, when they hear this, oh, just be present with her feelings and don't take them personally. Don't like try to fix her or whatever. It doesn't mean that your needs don't matter. What it means is that these things are independent. Like, she's having her experience based on her life, an entire lifetime of history, conditioning, and programming that she's been through. And that experience is just its own thing. And my experience is its own thing that I'm having over here. She's not doing something to me. And that's what really not taking it personally is. I have needs. She has needs. I have an experience. She has an experience. And these things are not things that are being done to each other. Like, we're not hurting each other by having our experience, but it feels that way when we assume that the way that our partner is experiencing their world is an attack on us.
That's because we're taking it personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a starting point at actually being able to execute on not taking things personally is really just understanding how much of your own history goes into the experience that you're having in the moment. And how, here's a statement that somebody told me once that kind of, because by the way, I used to be I'm not claiming high horse here. I used to be captain defensive. I used to be captain of the take things personally team. I'm not speaking from a position of moral authority. I'm speaking from deep humility of having been really shit at this for most of my life until to sort it out. Seeing how much of my own individual unique history and experiences went into me seeing the world the way that I do, and then realizing that every other person has a different perspective. They've been like, all of theirs is so unique to them that they don't even exist in the same world that I do, because they see everything differently. And the statement that somebody said that blew my mind was, there's a different version of you, Andrew, Eric, different version of you that exists in the mind of every single person who has ever met you.
Yep.
You're not the same person to yourself as you are to Rachel, as you are to me. I'm not the same person to you, to Don, to anybody else as I am to myself. No one knows me. No one knows what goes on in here.
That's interesting. I have a quote from the book that I think really sums that up. It says, whatever you think, whatever you feel, I know is your problem and not my problem. It is the way you see the world. It is nothing personal because you are dealing with yourself, not with me. Others are going to have their own opinion according to their belief systems. So nothing they think about me is really about me, but it is about them. And that sounds pretty cold at first, doesn't it? It sounds like,
Yeah.
But also think of it, it's badass. Like, that's true Dom. Like, and that's where the importance of having, your point about having an open heart is really important, because this could be really interpreted being like, that's your shit, that's not my shit, that's not my responsibility, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is care deeply, but don't get caught up that whatever's happening with them is not your thing. Like, it's your responsibility, but it doesn't mean, like, the difference between taking something personally and taking responsibility for something are two totally different things. And I think a lot of times people put the two together and think that in order to take responsibility for something, we have to take it personally.
But,
and so the thing that we take responsibility for, we are like, oh shit, you get all upset. And it's like, dude, it's okay. It's on me. I'll take care of it. It's my responsibility. I got this.
here's a little statement to maybe shake up reality a little bit if someone's listening to this and they're new to this concept. Until you stop taking someone else's stuff personally, you cannot love them. You're not loving them. You are engaging with them on a level of your judgment of them. You're not allowing them to be in their own experience.
Exactly. You're actually controlling them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is crazy for us to say this here. We're out of a podcast about conscious dominance and we're saying don't control them. But it's actually, that kind of control is an unconscious control.
Yep,
it's
that's
unconscious dominance. Yeah, exactly. And that's manipulation. And so then every time that you are taking something personally and then controlling them and doing something to help them, or go out and restructure something, or proving yourself to or defensive, or any of these things, there's an underlying part of you that's controlling the external environment so as not to impact you. And that's, like you just said, it's not actually loving it as it is. It's saying you need to be a certain way and then I will love you.
There's another thing that I heard years ago that changed my life, and that was that most people go through life trying to control every external reality so that they can feel okay.
Yep.
Like, I'm the unchangeable thing. everything else needs to be different. I'm like, in this approach, I'm the one who's already perfect, and everything else, meaning government, education, my partner, my family, everyone else needs to be different, and then I'll be okay. And we like, all of that is me just making everyone else's life and their unique experience about myself. I can
Truth.
change and be okay regardless of external circumstances. That's freedom.
Truth. And it's freedom. And it's what ultimately, as a masculine, we're striving for freedom. You want freedom? This is the path to freedom. Because as long as we're taking things personally, we'll never have freedom. We will always be a victim of other people's emotional reactions and their stories and their projections of their reality, which is not actually based in reality, which is based upon their version of their domestication.
Yeah, and if we stop playing, or if we're playing the victim, there is no one who's going to look at you and think that guy's really got his shit together. The guy who's blaming everyone else, who's constantly triggered and reactive. There's no one that's going to look at you and think that guy has his shit together. That guy is in charge of his own reality. That guy is somebody that I could trust and let go of control and allow him to take. Would a woman trust a guy to lead her if he can't even manage his own reality?
Right. That's totally true. And I want to give a sports example, but I like watching football, and then I even watch after the football games, the quarterbacks being interviewed, and you'll see like a young quarterback and he'll blame his offensive lineman, or he'll blame somebody else on the team for mistakes.
He's probably not playing for very many years.
Yeah. And then there's a guy who's literally thought of as one of the best ever. And every time he's asked about how his team or what could be better, he always says, I could do better. I could do better. I didn't do it that well than that, or I threw it too far, but I could do better ultimately. And he's the best, and he's regarded as the best. And this keeps coming back to this, that if you want to be the best, you have to take responsibility for yourself, because in taking responsibility for yourself, you're constantly a student. You're constantly able to be in the process of getting better. There's no static. There's never, oh, I arrive and I'm at the best. If you arrive anywhere and you're static, that means you're decreasing. You're going backwards. Like it's in nature. There's either growth or there's decay. And staying still is decay. So the growth comes from taking responsibility. And to take responsibility is the opposite of taking it personally. If you take it personally, you're not taking it responsibility. If you're, they seem similar though at first glance. Oh, I'm going to take it personally. I'm responsible. That's what I was saying. The difference between being responsible for someone and taking it personal. It's worth talking about because it's not obvious at first. And we make this, which we'll get into assuming, but we make this connection between taking responsibility for a situation or someone and taking it personally. I would love for you to talk a little bit about taking responsibility for somebody or situation versus taking personal situation.
Responsibility implies ownership.
Yes.
Truly be responsible for something, you have to have agency over it. You have to have some ability to act towards an end or to move in the direction of what you need to be right. And I can see them being better if we went this direction, and then applying action towards that end. So in order to move anything in a functional way to a better place than where it is right now, we have to accept the reality and the truth of. If we are in denial of what is, if we're resisting it, if we are not okay with it, we cannot change it.
Because you don't actually see it.
Right.
You can't. If you're impacted by their reality, then you're in your story and you're doing what you just said. You're making it about you. You're not actually able to hold what
Yeah,
is.
so you're not taking
And
responsibility. You are not in a state of
yeah,
responsibility. You are in a
no.
state of blame and victimhood. And then if you're trying to change things from that place, if you're trying to lead a woman in a dom sub dynamic from a place
Mhm.
of being in resistance to reality or making her wrong or assuming that you've got it all figured out and she needs to be the one to change, you're not taking responsibility. You're just manipulating. So
Truth.
you have to be
Truth.
in a place of accepting reality as the truth of where it is. Then you can start to make meaningful changes towards something better, something different.
Mhm.
And the moment that you are making someone else's experience about yourself and not truly being present with them and their experience and witnessing them having their own separate experience,
Mhm.
undoing codependency is another way you could say, don't take things personally.
Yes, I love that. I love it.
Because
I
then
love it.
when you're out of codependency and you can just be truly present with that other
Mhm.
person, now you can actually help them. Not in the moment. You right now in the moment you let them be where they are. Like you're already good enough.
Mhm.
You don't need to be changed. You're just where you are and that's reality and that's okay. That's the starting point to being able to truly lead in relationship.
No, it's so true. I'm going to read this statement again. Others are going to have their own opinion according to their belief systems. So nothing they think about me is really about me, but it is about them. And that's clear. He's being very clear there. Don Miguel Ruiz, spiritual teacher, shaman. You know what I want to say too is often the spiritual, new age, mystical world, people think of it as fluffy. But if you think about the spiritual world, I often think about it as there's religion, and then people kind of group over here, the spiritual world, but they're all together now. They're all overlap in these different sections as things are dissolving. But any spiritual practice worth its salt has rigor to it. The whole point, if you look at a religion, any religion worth its salt has rigor. And if you are interested in spiritual growth or spirituality and there's no rigor, you're not interested in spiritual growth. Rigor is a part of it. There's no way to get from point A, where you want to be in your sloppy mess, and go to point B, which is conscious, and not go through a period of rigor. And the place to start with rigor is inside. And the inside game that needs to be rigor. This is what these agreements are. And this is a great thing to practice. And I love the simplicity, like you said, of this tract. Often we'll come into a religion or a spiritual practice or any kind of thing, and we're trying to do 10 different things. It's like having 10 different goals. You don't have any goals if you got 10 different
Mhm.
goals. If you got 10 different women in your life, you're not really a conscious Dom. You're just juggling plates and juggling. And it's the same with when we're working on our inside. If we've got a lot of different metrics that we're looking at, there are too many competing factors. It would be cool to just take this one idea and live with it for a month. And that's the only thing that you focus on inside of you, is not taking anything personally. I've done this. It works. My life is not the same. I still take things personally, but at least as I'm taking it personally, I'm aware that I'm taking it personally.
That's
Every time I fuck up now, as I'm fucking up, I'm aware that I'm fucking up. And it shows to me, no matter how conscious you are, you still have this trigger body, this fight or flight response. And for some of us that have been through some deep trauma, unwinding that can't come just through the head. And you also have to come through in the body. And we talked about that separately. So I want to honor that. So there will still be situations where you will take it personally, where you will have a fight or flight response. And all we're asking you to do in those moments is realize that you're taking it personally, and that ultimately you have a choice. And at the very least, can you broaden the gap and pause? And as your body's in that flush of taking it personally, which I still think there are certain things, maybe it forever will, can I not react? Can I not say anything? Can I act in a way that where that part of me that's taking it personally is not leading the moment, and I can just be in my body that's fully inflamed, fully enraged, and just sit there in that feeling, in that discomfort? And this is why the rigor of spirituality is the rigor of your capacity to be in discomfort, because a lot of this is about being uncomfortable. What is it like to sit there with someone spewing shit that's bullshit, that's lies about you, and you sitting there and not taking it personally? That's dominance. That's conscious dominance. That's their person. That's their shit.
Here's a great example I heard of this that I wanted to make sure that I share here is if somebody walked up to you on the street and said, Eric, I hate your blue hair. You look fucking ridiculous with your blue hair. Right? Would you care?
No.
No, because you don't have fucking blue hair.
Right.
When you realize that everything that other people are saying is just like that, because they don't actually know what's going on inside of your real experience. They're speaking to you through their own lens, from their own perspective. You don't have blue hair, and they also don't know or understand anything that you're saying. But the problem that we run into as men is because we are so inherently sensitive and easily hurt. And one of us was hurt when we were young in different ways to different extents, but every single one of us was hurt and wounded. And then we go out with walls up to protect ourselves from others happening to hurt us in the same way. We do it might have happened once, but I'm never going to let it happen again thing. And we go through life with all these big walls up, and we're acting to avoid repeat occurrences of that pain. But by doing so, we're holding on to that pain, and we're letting it control us and control our reality. And then from there, it feels like everything is personal because we are still holding all of that pain that was hurt in the past. And that's why guys end up going out looking for so much validation and approval from the women that they're with. Because if you're taking negative things personally, you're also taking positive things personally.
Yeah, we got to get into that. And before we get into that part, I just want to throw out here, this is the elephant in the room that's obvious, but the things that we're going to take personally are the things that we don't like about ourselves. So when we get triggered, it's often something that inside of ourselves that we feel insecure about or inadequate about. So I'm going to own one right now that if you are watching a video, you may not know. It's not patently obvious right at first, but you'll probably notice. But I have a lot of insecurity around my teeth, or to be more precise, the fact that I'm missing some teeth stems from a little rough lifestyle and not always taking care of my teeth. That's something that I'm correcting and fixing as we go along, but it makes me insecure. And so I find insecurity. And so if people say anything about my teeth or about my appearance, I get triggered. If someone came to me and said, God, your teeth are fucked up, I would take that would impact me. That would be hard for me to hear. And it's literally the thing that I always worry about, some comment being made and being like, who's listening to that guy with no teeth? So it's literally this thing that
let's
I'm just
be real.
Call it out.
For the people who are not watching the video, you actually do have teeth. You don't have no teeth.
Yeah, I don't have no teeth, but I have more teeth missing than the teeth that I have. Okay. But they're usually in the back, and one of my front teeth is missing, and it's false, but the false is, anyway, they're good to go right now. But part of my superpower is being vulnerable too. So me just saying this out loud, that this is the thing that I'm insecure about, actually, ironically, makes me take it less personally, because I'm not hiding it. I'm not in shame about it. And I'm modeling this because that's real for me. And I want to model this for other men out there, that the things that we have most shame about, the way to be more resilient and stronger is just to come right out front and be like, Yeah, I have a hard time getting it up. Like, say that in a date. That woman will be like, whoa, I respect him. I may not want to have sex with him, but I respect him. Truth, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
and ultimately, if we are a masculine man, ultimately, primarily, we want to be respected. And respected comes from, ironically, not taking things personally, from being, there's a vulnerability in it. Because if we're just shielding ourselves to everything, then we're taking it personally. Ironically, does that make
yep.
sense? Whereas if we can go around with an open heart and we can love and we can be honest and we can be truthful, then we can not take things personally. And a lot of why we take things personally is because we have parts of ourselves that we don't like and that we have shame around. And if we can own them, then we're more resilient. We're anti-fragile.
Before we move on to the the taking things personally that we like, I just want to make this get this one thought out there that it is my belief. Anybody who's listened to this long enough knows that I use this word untriggerable. It is
Mm-hmm.
my belief that we can get to a point where we cannot be triggered, where we can feel solid
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the circumstances. I'm not there, but I
Mm-hmm.
have to believe that's possible for
Mm-hmm.
me to approach life in the way that I do. I need to believe that is possible because that is the direction that I am attempting to go with my own experience. Now, this isn't about not letting anything else trigger me. This is about me being able to be okay regardless of the circumstances that I'm in. And
Mm-hmm.
getting to that point where I really am beyond the ability to be triggered
Mm-hmm.
starts with being triggered. It starts with being
Yeah,
upset.
no, for sure. For
And it has
sure.
to happen this way. It has to happen where you don't know that it's happening. And then once you see it, like some people might start to see some of themselves in what they're hearing here in this podcast. Okay, then what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen is you're going to do the same thing, but afterwards you're going to recognize, oh, I did that. And then
Mm-hmm. And then you like getting triggered
and,
because it's, what you're learning.
and then eventually you'll start to recognize it, like you mentioned, as it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm fucking up and I realize that I'm fucking up in the moment. And then eventually you can get to a point where you can realize that it's about to happen and choose
Mm-hmm.
something different. And when you get there where you can choose something different, when you can make a conscious choice to not take it personally, to not get affected by
Mm-hmm.
something that someone else is saying that has nothing to do with you,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to build a new body of evidence for yourself to lean on. That is a way that you can respond. That's a way that you can interact with the world. And then
Mm-hmm.
over time, as you build that capacity and build on your ability to choose something other than
Mm-hmm.
making it about yourself in this
Mm-hmm.
example, then you can almost dissolve that entire set of conditions and programs that you've been living under that have been in control of you, and you can take control of your reality. And that for me is
Mm-hmm.
what I mean when I say untriggerable. Like I really
Mm-hmm.
do believe that I can reach a point where in every moment of my life I can be that solid, where I can be that much in charge of how I am responding rather than letting my
Mm-hmm.
programming be in charge.
I think that's very well said. I think of it the word audit, that a relationship with a woman and you get triggered, just think of it as you're auditing your triggers
Mm-hmm.
and then start keeping track. Be as meticulous with your triggers as you are with your money. Write it down. Journal. This is what the work is. This is the inside work. You want to know when you say what's the inside work, what's therapy? Like it's getting triggered, paying attention to when the trigger is, auditing it, seeing how well you did better. What is the thing that happens? What are the patterns? And that's between you and your therapist or you and a friend, but it's not necessarily even with between you and your woman.
No.
It,
person who's
It's not for
triggering
her
you
to
cannot be the one that helps you see and sort through those triggers.
Exactly. Otherwise, they won't trigger you anymore.
But
They'll be afraid to trigger you, and then they're the dom.
it's why parents
They're the
can't
one.
be the one to help their kids heal from the problems that were caused by the parents.
Right. Don't go to them
Right.
to feel better about your daddy issues. Okay. I would love to talk about this that you brought up that I love, that is taking it personally in a positive way, where we start believing the hype.
Yeah.
Speak about that a little bit.
Well, so it stands to reason that if somebody says to me, like you mentioned the teeth being the thing that you're like maybe the most sensitive about, for me, it would be my weight, right? I'm in pretty good shape now. I'm not in perfect shape. I'm in way better shape than I've been for pretty much my whole life, but I was a fat kid. Chubby kid. I was always the chubbiest one. I was the one who didn't want to run around with my shirt off on like when shirts and skins in basketball. Oh God, if I had to be on the skins team, it was the worst day of my life back then. So it stands to reason that if I would take something personally in a negative light, I'm also going to have the capacity to do that in a positive light, meaning somebody says, "Hey, Andrew, you are really great with your articulateness when you speak on podcasts." And I'd be like, "Thank you. That feels really good to hear." Okay. That was kind of them, but also that is still just them seeing me through their lens, through their experience, actually having to do with me. It's their perception of me. And that is no more. Taking things personally doesn't mean you let in all the good stuff and you block out all the bad stuff. It means that even the things that come across as compliments, even the things that come through as kindness, still are met with the same level of detachment because they don't actually know me internally. I can see it as being, I can be grateful for it, but I don't need to get a big head about myself or build a big ego based on because my business. Our business with Infinite Devotion is blown up for us this year, right? Our social media has tripled. Like everything has just been going really, really well. And if I were to start taking that personally and getting a big head because of how great I am now, I'm just taking things personally. It just in a way that feels good. And it is just much necessary for me to stay detached from that so that I can stay stable. I want to be solid. I don't want to be just trying to ride the highs all the time. Because then I'm just under the control of anyone who's willing to offer me validation.
All right. And then you're fragile. Because then if you're not up at the top all the time, and you fall a little bit, then you're fucked and you can't come back up. You can't rise up. You're not resilient. I think that resiliency and anti-fragility is born on an indifference to people's adulation, because a lot of times that's equally their story. And a lot of times what they are loving about you, you didn't even have to work for. They might like that you're tall, or they might like that you're a guy that like fits something of the sense that you look.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we don't take a compliment, right? It doesn't mean that I have to brush off something when somebody has something nice to say. I can be grateful for the fact that they, in their experience, are something about me is impacting them positively and that they're willing to share that with me. And I can appreciate that with humility. But taking it personally means that I'm building a sense of self and a sense of identity out of their positive view of myself. I'm still putting them in control of my reality.
I think that's 100% true. It's just as, and especially with women, because then you start living for them to say good job. And I think we all fall into prey to that. I do. I want to hear good job, or I want to hear her respect or her celebration, or God, really were awesome this day or
Mhm.
whatever that is. But ultimately, there's a Mark Manson thing. I appreciate him, and he has this email that comes out, and he says, "No one at your funeral is going to say, hey, he fucked like a what was it, like a monster, or like just awesome, or his tennis swing was awesome." What they're going to say is he loved. And I think it's just such an important reminder that ultimately what people most want and that's most important is your capacity to love, your capacity to hold them when they're down. And that's not something that is easily, people don't throw that out there flippantly. That often the things that people have the deepest appreciation for us around, it's not easily articulated. And it's not something to, it's not like junk food that's just pandered around. And a lot of, I think, compliments and a lot of people's adulation, yeah, it feels great, but if we're living and doing life to get more of those things, then we become just as much a victim as the people that are living life to avoid those things. If we're always steering in the direction of acclaim or clicks, and I think that's where this clickbait and a lot of this stuff leads to. And I think you see a lot of people, it was interesting to pay attention to the media and music and everything, and a lot of different world people living for the next hit and living for that, but not having a center or values or their own thing that drives them. This is temporary and fleeting, and the next thing will come along. And if you can realize that even with women too, if they are meeting you because you're in the fad or you're doing something to get approval and that's not actually you, it's not sustainable. It won't last because you're actually, and it won't mean anything ultimately. And you're actually not going to respect yourself or her for even liking you.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually you.
Well, that's why you can't just go to the gym, if you go to the gym as a guy and you get yourself in really good shape, you're going to get attention from women. And if that is what stops, is just the attention and validation you get for the way that you look, you're taking it personally, right? You're thinking that your looks actually mean something, and you will realize that never gets you any farther than the depth of your physical appearance. If that's all there is to you is your looks, and you're getting fed by the validation of that, there's got to be something more to you. And that's where we start looking at all of the stuff we talk about here on conscious dominance. So this is a really good conversation. I look forward to breaking down the other 3 of these with you in the upcoming episodes.
Look forward to next week. Let's do it.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great.